What's up, guys? Julian Arnold is one of the top pros in pickleball with his very fast and aggressive playstyle. Near the end of last year, he announced the launch of his own brand, Volair, and in this video, I'll give you my first look on the Mach 1 16mm and let you know if it's worth your money. The paddle can be purchased for $159.99, but with discount code PBSTUDIO on their website, it should be closer to about $145. It comes in two thicknesses, 16mm and 14mm, weighs on average 7.9 ounces. It's the same shape as a Hyperion CFS, T700 carbon fiber face, and a swing weight of 114, and has a 5.5-inch handle along with a 4.3-inch grip circumference. I will say the grip does feel pretty chunky in my hands, even though it's listed as 4.3 inches. It did feel considerably larger than what I'm used to with 4.25-inch grips. So if you don't like beefy grips, do be aware of that. Now, as far as spin goes, the Volair got a result of 1941 RPM, which is an absolutely fantastic result by today's standards. Here's the biggest thing about raw carbon fiber and spin. There's not really a whole lot for me to say these days. As long as it's over 1,500, or maybe by these days, because things have gone up a little bit, 1,600 to 1,700, that ends up being fantastic during play. As long as it's not a very low amount of spin, you're probably going to be fine. And with the Volair, there was no shot that I felt like I couldn't hit because of a lack of spin. So it's great, basically just like every other raw carbon fiber paddle is on the market. The Volair Mach 1 is what many players in the nerdy circles, and yes, I'm one of those, are now calling Gen 1 raw carbon fiber paddles. Gen 2 is the term coined for thermoformed paddles like Legacy, Vatic Pro, 6.0, and the Carbon X series. All that people are trying to make clear is that Gen 1 raw carbon fiber paddles were typically quite soft, and Gen 2 is much more powerful. That's why the Volair Mach 1 16mm falls into the Gen 1 category. It has no thermoforming and plays very soft. It's a fantastic control paddle, and especially after using a thermoformed paddle with lots of pop for the last month or two, using this paddle feels very effortless for dinks, resets, and blocks. You hold the paddle there and just watch the ball float right back over into the kitchen. This isn't surprising because many Gen 1 raw carbon fiber paddles have a very similar trait. If I had to rank the Volair on a scale, I would put it on the softer end of Gen 1 paddles. So if you're looking for a paddle with great touch and high spin, this paddle does both of those things very well. Now, don't get me wrong, it still has some power, but it depends entirely on what you benchmark it against. If you compare it to a Legacy or Carbon 1X, it's severely lacking power. However, compared to a Selkirk Labs Project 003, it has a bit more power. I wouldn't go telling anyone that the Mach 1 is a power paddle. It's a control paddle all day long that has moderate power. I think after coming back from a Carbon 1X, especially the 14mm recently, hands battles just felt much harder to put the ball away. With these new thermoformed ones, you can kind of hold your paddle there or give it a nice flick with your wrist. With the Volair, I really felt like I had to swing through the ball to try and put it away. The feel of the paddle is very plush and has a muted feedback for the ball. The muted feel is pretty similar to the Hyperion CFS 16mm, but maybe slightly less dampened. In all honesty, it's probably a little closer to the Vision than it is the Hyperion, but there are similarities there. The sweet spot felt fine to me. There wasn't any point where I felt it stood out or felt subpar. It's about as average as you can get for a sweet spot on a paddle. Now, before we go any further, there is a catch while I was reviewing this paddle, and that's the Rhombus R1.16. Many of you probably haven't heard about this company because it's very small and run by a retired engineer named Dong. He sent me the R1.16 ages ago, but I never did anything with it because there were higher priority reviews at the time. A few people asked me if I could hit it, and I immediately noticed how similar it played to the Volair Mach 1. Not only that, but all of the specs are essentially identical. While drilling, I would switch back and forth between them and I could hardly tell them apart. Any difference I noticed could easily be attributed to the variance expected when making paddles. There are usually slight differences depending on one is heavier or not, or maybe one was just assembled slightly more poorly than the other one. My Rhombus R1.16 weighs 8.2 ounces and the Volair Mach 1 weighs 8 ounces flat. So why does it matter if the R1.16 is similar? Well, it comes down to price. The R1 can be purchased directly from Ronbis for $120, but with discount PBSTUDIO, it's $100 flat. There are even listings on Amazon for the R1 that have it for $100 with Prime shipping. The Volair is $159.99, and if you use the same code, it comes down to roughly $145. So even if there were small differences between these paddles that set them apart just a little bit, would it be worth an extra $35 to $45? For almost everyone, I highly doubt it. For $145, the Volair is a pretty solid value, but for $100, the R1 is an insane value, especially when you consider that Ronbis has a 6-month warranty and Volair is only 3 months. Well, this quickly became a first look about 2 paddles, but if you're considering the Volair, it's important to know that the Ronbis exists. I have a tough time wanting to tell anyone to buy the Volair when the R1 exists. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if these were identical paddles from the factory with different branding put on them. In fact, when I take the handles apart, there's the same plastic strip covering the polymer to seal it off, and there's also this what appears to look like a strip of wood going across the handle in the same exact location. Combine that with all of the specs being near identical and the shape and how they play, I have a very hard time believing these aren't the same thing. And in fact, the R1 was actually released several months before Julian's paddle was. Now, I really don't want to go down the rabbit hole of who copied who or if anyone copied anyone. The fact of the matter is, a lot of these paddles are made in the same factory, and the factory is going to share anything with anyone who pays them enough money. So for all we know, Volair had no idea Ronbis even existed, and the factory just said, hey, we've got this paddle, do you want it? And they said, yeah, that's a great paddle, let's go with it. So ultimately, it's just going to come down to how much you want to support Julian Arnold as a player and a business owner, or how much you want the best deal possible. Regardless of your choice, they are solid performing paddles, but they aren't anything standout or new. It's a solid, high-tier spin, raw carbon fiber paddle that is best suited for a control player. I would put it in a similar category as the Yola Vision. If you already have a raw carbon fiber paddle that you're happy with, there's no reason to go out and buy either of these unless you're looking for a cheaper backup option. In that case, the R1 would be a great option. I think it's going to be very interesting to see how the market shakes out this year because there's a lot of identical or near identical paddles being released at high and low prices. It seems that many of the newer companies are racing to the bottom to keep the big guys honest in their pricing. The bright side is this means you as the consumer should have much better prices for competitive paddles. So there you guys go. That is my first look on the Ronbis R1 and the Volair Mach 1 16mm. Now, the one advantage I will give to Volair is that they do have a 14mm option of their paddle, and Ronbis does not seem to have a thinner option. And Pickleball Will has told me several times that the 14mm Volair is actually a pretty nice paddle. I don't personally have one, so I can't give you my thoughts on it, but Will is pretty educated as well and knows his stuff, so I do trust his opinion on that. So if you are looking for a thinner option, then you are going to have to go with the Volair. But anyways, if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to click like and subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.